Welcome to the Knife Junkie podcast, your weekly dose of knife news and information about knives and knife collecting. Here's your host, Bob the Knife Junkie DeMarco.
Welcome to the Knife Junkie podcast. I'm your host, Bob DeMarco. On this edition of the show, I'm speaking with Michael Grasso of Armis Knife and Tool. I first heard of Michael's knives from my friend and knife maven, Dave of OG Blade Reviews. He got an Armis VSK1 and, knowing my taste in knives, informed me that I must get one. He even went so far as to connect me with Michael himself. Well, Dave was right, and indeed Michael is at the helm of a great new American knife company, creating useful and robust EDC fixed blades, universal sheaths, and other interesting implements. He's a career firefighter turned knife maker whose knives and tools have a notably tactical bent. Easy on the eyes, great in hand, and sharp as hell, Armis Knife and Tool's knives are a new and welcome addition in my everyday carry. We'll meet Michael and find out what it's like to go from public servant to small business owner. But first, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share the show with a friend. That's one of the best ways you can help the show. Another way is to go to Patreon and support us there. Quickest way to do that is to head over to TheKnifeJunkie.com/Patreon or scan the QR code on your screen. Again, that's TheKnifeJunkie.com/Patreon.
Hey, knife makers, tired of paying too much for your online store? LaunchCard gives you everything you need for just $27 a month. Sell as many blades as you want with our drag and drop store builder. No tech skills needed. You get all the good stuff: secure checkout, back in stock alerts, and easy product reviews to show off your happy customers. Plus, your store looks great on phones and computers. Already using Shopify? Knife makers are switching to LaunchCard because it just works better. Try it free for 14 days at TheKnifeJunkie.com/launch. That's TheKnifeJunkie.com/launch.
There he is.
I didn't time that. I didn't plan that at all.
Welcome to the show, sir. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too. Thanks for that intro. That was that was cool. Nicely done.
Oh, well, hey man, well earned. I'm holding your VSK1 in hand right now.
Yeah.
And as I was telling you before we started rolling, I really have taken to this knife. I love it, and it felt great in hand and in pocket immediately. So congratulations on the rolling out of this knife.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Well, I know it's not brand new. When did this knife come out?
Oh man. Maybe 2 years ago is when I first designed it. My brain's a little foggy at the moment, but probably 2 years. We've been making it for a little while. It wasn't our original flagship knife. Our karambite was our EDK. But the VSK1 has quickly become our most popular knife. Yeah.
Yeah. Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I think that the price point is right. Specifically, we get a lot of comments about that, but I mean, speaking for myself, and I guess the customer feedback is just the way it fits your hand is it almost feels like it was made for your hand. And I did spend a lot of time trying to come up with that design, and it was like I was putting together pieces of puzzle, and once I had everything right, it just felt perfect. And so I've not changed it, I've not modified it at all. I've done some shorter blade lengths for some people, but just the ergonomics seem to work out really well, both in the forward and reverse grip.
Yeah, my initial thought is some people love the ring, some people don't like the ring,
Right?
or not just the ring on your knives, but on any knife. And but this will fit and work with anyone's carry style, and I would imagine it has something to do with that. This handle is crazy. I know that the karambite has a very similar blade, but this handle, and I guess we're jumping right into this knife. But
that's fine. Let's go.
I am very hot and cold with double finger partitions. I usually like a singular finger choil, and then the rest of the fingers accommodated elsewhere. But this knife and a few others in my collection, it just feels so perfect the way it is. So I bet that the handle on this knife has a lot to do with that. So what was it like designing this knife? What were your design goals for this?
So I'm a very practical guy, and there's a lot of flashy stuff out there. And I'm not particularly a big ring guy, like Karambit guy, but that one for me, it was kind of fun to design, and I felt like it worked. But I'm very practical. A lot of that comes from just my background, especially in my job, my former career as a fireman, keeping things really simple. And so I always kind of go back to like, what's the foundation of a tool, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. But specifically with knife, like what's the purpose? Is this purpose outdoor recreational use? Is the purpose self-defense? And so I would just kind of funnel down and be like, okay, I want a knife that is a really great self-defense tool that makes sense and is practical. Because it's one thing to design a knife that looks really tactical, but then if you go to use that knife, on a training dummy or one of those Bob mannequins, I think we all have one of those with lots of slices in them. Once you start using it, you really figure out what the friction points are and like what the hot spots are and like what's going to hurt your hand. Does the knife want to fall out of your hand? Does it want to drive itself deeper in your grip? And so all those things that were kind of on my mind. Again, I have a firefighting background, but the military, tactical has always been like a passion of mine, and done lots of different trainings and whatnot. And so my focus has always kind of been more towards the self-defense aspect of things. And so that's kind of was the true foundation of designing that knife.
Yeah, I mean, you can tell it. I mean, to me, this knife has, with its blade style, first of all, it's a spear point, and you've got a point that comes right down the center of the handle.
Yep.
So it's great in either grip,
Yep.
or I should say any grip.
Yes.
You always kind of know where that point is. But it's also a very practical blade, and it's, I would imagine it's good for a lot. In the short period of time I've had this, I haven't gotten in any fights, but I've used it for a lot of just regular sort of cutting tasks, and it's great for that.
That's great. It's funny you mentioned not getting any fights. That's amazing. I actually don't want to hear that at all. But I did have a customer reach out to me today who's a police officer, and the subject line in the email was first kill. And I was like, oh no, like, oh, this could go either way. I don't know what's gonna happen. But he sent me a picture, and it was like a kilo of fentanyl that he had seized, and he used his knife. It was actually Karambit to cut open the package. And so I'll send you the picture. I should have sent it to you, but it's like there's fentanyl on the tip of the blade, and it's laying on the. So that was kind of neat, but yeah.
Your mind went elsewhere first.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I want to get into some of your background before we talk more about this knife and others. You're a former firefighter. You were a career firefighter. What was that like? How did knives fit into it? And then how did you become a knife maker?
Great question. Yeah, so I was a career fireman for just under 14 years. I did some volunteer work before that in my hometown. But I used knives a lot throughout my career. The department I worked for in Southern Connecticut, we covered a large strip of I-95, and so we were constantly up there for car accidents. We dealt with a lot of car accidents on our normal roads, but so that means cutting seatbelts, cutting airbags, and so I was constantly using knives. I was really big into Emerson. I still love Emerson knives, and so I was always buying Emerson knives with my uniform allowance. And so I got to use a lot of knives that way. So in a very practical sense, never in a self-defense scenario, but in a practical sense, I use them a lot throughout my career. Yeah.
So what led to your leaving
Yes.
the fire service and becoming a knife maker?
So I in 2019 got injured at work, and a lot of times you think that, especially for firemen or first responders, and you think, oh, it must have been this catastrophic thing. Well, for me it wasn't, and it's kind of the story for a lot of first responders. Is it's such a physically tough job.
Mm-hmm.
Cops with their duty belts and having to chase people, and there's a lot of injuries that come from that. And then for firemen, a lot, it's neck, shoulder, and knee issues because you're carrying so much weight. We wear heavy gear, and then we put on a backpack or an air pack, helmet, mask. We're crawling around in awkward positions. We're, using hoses that are very heavy and ladders, and really putting our bodies in awkward positions. And so things break down, things fail. And typically it's a joint injury like a shoulder or knee. But for me, it was my neck. And I always had neck issues throughout my career. A lot of guys do. And until one day I was an officer towards the end of my career. I was lieutenant, and I was helping train one of our our probationary firefighters. And I remember just kind of pulling hose off and twisting and feeling something kind of different, not painful, but different in my neck. My left arm felt a little funny, but like just kind of weird. And so I kind of just sucked it up and dealt with it for a while. Within 2 weeks, I started getting intense pain in my left arm, so bad that I didn't sleep for about a week before I finally went to the hospital. They did all sorts of workups, and they found that I had severe arthritis, stenosis, and bulging disc at my C6, C7 vertebrae, which is right at your shoulder line. And so that was crushing the nerve going down my left arm. And basically it got to a point where it just the dam couldn't hold back the water anymore. And so I was a lot bigger guy. I was about 200 pounds at the time. I'm about 175 now. And my arm went from like this to nothing in about a week. And that freaked me out because I didn't know what was going on.
Wow.
And so finally, after all the diagnoses that, all the testing, they said, hey, this is what you got going on. It's impinging that nerve. If we don't do surgery, you're probably going to have a paralyzed arm within a week or so.
Whoa.
Or, yeah, it was very, or if you hadn't come in sooner, you might have been paralyzed forever. And with that arm. So anyway, I had surgery a couple months after they did some other therapies to try. And then I recovered. It was right at the start of COVID in 2020. And so I used that whole first half of the year of COVID to recover and recuperate. And I felt amazing. I was home. I was sleeping well. I was eating well. I had rehabbed by myself at home and gotten really strong. Probably some of the best shape I've gotten, in my life and throughout my career. But then once I went back to work, about July, August, and just got back in the grind of things, my body started to break down again. And the permanent nerve damage that I have in this arm, my arm would just turn off on me. So if I was doing push-ups or dumbbells, you get to the point where you feel like you can do a couple more, my arm would just shut off and I drop stuff on my face. And so it scared me. Jeez. Because, I thought, man, if I'm in a situation where I need to help myself or help, one of my brothers or sisters or a fireman or a person, in the public, I'm not going to be able to do that. And so it was a really difficult decision, but I said, hey, I'm going to try to put in for a medical retirement. So that was in 2021 when we did that.
Jeez. Yeah, I've known a number of firefighters and police officers, but mostly firefighters. And I know there's a lot of repetitive stress just from getting in and getting out of the truck and having those tanks on and all of that. And the thought of having your arm fail on you, that's terrifying. Nerve damage is awful. I mean, it's all awful, but man, well, I'm glad you were able to recuperate and get yourself better. How did the knives work into it? I know you were carrying Emerson's and doing other, using other knives for your job, so you had some affinity towards them. But I mean, making that jump to knife maker, that's a big deal. How did that happen?
Yeah, it's a super interesting transition, but I've always loved knives. I've always had this affinity for knives my entire life. I always collected them. I was trying to find like one of the first folders I ever got, but I can't find it. I don't know where it is. So I always loved knives, always loved using them. And then I started training with Bill Rapier from Amtac Shooting and Sports, right? Amtac Blades, phenomenal guy. I love Bill. I've done a lot of training with him over the years. And he's one of the guys that actually inspired me to get into this, just having him as a friend. But it was taking his like integrative combatives course back in late 20 teens. I don't remember when. And then I have a carpentry background, so I was homeschooled. So that gave me the ability to start an apprenticeship really young. I was about 12 years old. So I started a carpentry apprentice with an uncle and basically worked almost full time from the time I was 12 until I was 21 when I got hired as a career fireman. And so I had skills and I had knowledge and I knew how to work with wood and other materials and make things. We'd make fine cabinetry and we'd build houses and trim them and frame them. So I already had a really good base of experience with tools. And then one day in 2019, right before I was injured, actually, I remember thinking like holding a knife and being like, I can make this. Like, I can make this. And my wife was like, yeah, I know you can make one of these. Come on. And so I did the old YouTube University, which is just an incredible blessing for so many people to be able to just pick up new skills. So I watched a ton of videos and then I picked up some basic equipment, some files, made my own little file jig. And made my own little furnace with some fireplace bricks, and a blowtorch. And I made my first knife, and I actually have it if you want to see it.
Oh yeah, let's see it.
Yeah, so this was the very first knife that I made.
Oh my God, that is beautiful.
Yeah, it's the very, very, very first knife. It's I think it's 80 CRV2. is the steel on this, and some G10 handles with some
Hold that up
liners
a
and
little
some.
higher.
Oh, there we go.
There we go.
Yep. So it's got some green ODG10, some pins in there that are kind of burned. But yeah, this was the first knife that I made, and I brought it to work. And I remember showing the guys at work, and they were like, "That's really cool. Could you make me one?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." And so I ended up selling a couple knives to some different guys, and that like really got me excited. And then my wife was just, who's amazing. She was like, you can do this. Like, you can definitely like make this a really good hobby and turn into something. But she really encouraged me to do it, and so I started pursuing it in 2019, right before I got injured.
So that first knife that you were just showing, if you're just listening to this show, it's a really nice looking drop point with a green handle. But I gotta say, that grind looks really excellent, especially for a file jig. Um, that takes some serious time. And then to get even grinds with one of those, I've noodled around with them. It's not easy, but you did an awesome job.
Yeah, I think I cleaned it up with my I had a like a Harbor Freight 2x42 little grinder or something. I don't remember the make of the model, but I think I ended up getting that, cleaning it up. But yeah, I filed the bevels and everything by hand, cut it out with a hacksaw, like did it like, and then I was like, I can't do this anymore. If I'm going to do this, like, there's no way I can continue to do this. And then so that obviously I started buying some better tools, but yeah.
So, how many knives would you say you made in that first sort of stage when you're making them for your friends right after that first knife, before you started upgrading your tools?
Probably 15 or 20, maybe not very many. It was only a few. Um, and then, but then what happened was I got injured, and then I wanted to be careful, like while I was out, because of, just I don't want things to look wrong in the wrong lens, like, because you're out injured from work and you're doing this other thing. So I kind of had to take a break for a while, in between there and my retirement. Yeah.
Okay, so you start making knives. Your wife encourages you, which is a blessing.
Yeah.
It could go either way. Someone could say, "Oh, but what are you going to do for a living? We can't do this." But I got to say, well, you're I've had a lot of guests on the show who were homeschooled. I've had
Oh,
a number of guests who were former firefighters, and
nice.
almost all of them have the loving support of a wife if they have a wife.
Nice.
And I don't know. I think it's interesting. You start seeing patterns.
Yeah.
Um, but so you start working on knives. You start making them kind of in earnest. What was the first? How did you take the first plunge into a real shop?
So I have a small shop in our hometown where we live in northwestern Connecticut. I'm standing in it right now. As you can see, it's very small. It's about 14 by 20 or so, and I have some additional space outside of it. But yeah, I started on my deck, and then I kind of just took over this one space that we had, and just literally just piece by piece throughout the years, just added this and added that. And it's a slow process, but I'm proud of where we are now. There's other things we have to move towards because we're growing so much. But yeah, this is just our humble little shop here. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about how you're growing. Now, we talked
Yeah.
about the VSK1, and we talked about the knife and
Mhm.
how excellent it is. By the way, this is this 80 no, this is AEBL, right?
Yes, sir. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Um, well, for what do you like about AEBL, and how did you choose that steel?
So the simplest answer is that it's easy to heat treat, and I don't have to quench it in oil. And so that was really exciting for me because the last thing I wanted to do was burn down my small shop. I just had that fear of like, man, I just don't. I guess being a fireman, I've seen the way things can go bad, and so it was really came down to, okay, I just want a tough steel because I want to make these hard use knives, but I don't want to do anything too exotic because my goal was to really get to a price point where like the average guy can afford the knife, because there's some amazing knives out there, but if you're not, you're dropping a lot of money, and I have, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Mhm.
But I love knives so much that I wanted to try to get them to a point where I could put them in more people's hands. And so that choice of AEBL being a great steel but not like super expensive is one of the big reasons.
AEBL is a great steel, and it's got like a lot of the things we want out of a steel in terms of corrosion resistance and edge holding
Yeah.
and toughness. It's kind of it's been sort of rediscovered in the last, I don't know, 8 years or something like that. And it's awesome. Plus, it's not so expensive that you're afraid to use it. And not everyone is afraid to use their knives, but if I spend a lot of money on a knife that has a really great steel, ironically, it's great for a reason, but I might be squeamish about using it. So for a true everyday carry fixed blade, I think it's a great choice.
Yeah, it's kind of like if you have a Ferrari, right? You want to drive that thing, but man, you're going to be so careful you don't scratch it. And so I
Yeah.
totally respect that, and I think it's awesome. Um, yeah, it was just super simple, And the thing is, I think I never really got bit by the steel bug,
Mhm.
just because I'm super practical. It's like if guys in, I hate to use this analogy, but if guys in prison can inflict harm on each other with some very simple tools, like, it doesn't have to be that complicated. You know what I mean? So good
Yeah.
design, some good edge geometry, some good geometry on the blade. Again, what it comes down to, what are you looking to do with the tool? And so, yeah, that's why we chose that tool and that steel. And it's actually pretty interesting. Our water jet and steel supplier, I talked to them recently because I need to order steel, and they're like, yeah, we can't find any AEBL right now.
Hmm.
I'm like, really? And they're like, yeah, it's getting really hard to source. And it's probably because another maker I know of is probably buying it all. But so we might have to switch to some Nitro V possibly, which is a very similar steel. It's a great steel. But we do still have a bunch of AEBL in stock.
Well, I mean, you can't get married to one particular
Right.
steel.
Yeah.
Certain makers like Emerson, I only ever see Emerson's in 154 cm,
Yep.
also a great
Yep.
steel,
Yep.
also one that's within reach.
Yes.
But it's not really about the steel; it's about the knife and the heat treat, like you're
Yep.
saying. But also, if it's a everyday carry, if it's a fixed blade, but especially an everyday carry fixed blade, it's also about the sheath.
That's right.
That's make or break.
Yeah.
I am a daily carrier of fixed blades, and I have my collection is definitely fixed blade heavy, and I admittedly am a collector. I carry all these things, um, but I have a lot of them, way more than I need. And but the ones that have sheaths that I don't resonate with, even if they're great knives, they don't get as much pocket time
Yeah.
or in the waistband time.
Yeah.
Let's talk about this really excellent sheath. This is
Sure.
ambidextrous.
Yeah.
The knife fits in there either way. Let's talk about this.
Sure. Let's go. What do you want? What do you want to know? Where do you want to start?
Tell me everything about it. Well, okay. Let me just say this. I have a number of in-pocket fixed blade knives,
Hmm.
and they have great sheaths, but they're different. They sit way below the pocket seam line,
Right.
and they're thinner and they're not ambidextrous. At least, well, actually, one of them is. I have the Amtac Northman,
Yep.
great sheath.
Love
That's
it.
ambidextrous. The Fisher Blades Beckwith Covert, great sheath, not
Yep.
ambidextrous, but that's due to the nature of the knife. Those are great, but they drop below the pocket line. It's a different type of sheath.
Right.
And this is my first kind of sheath like this, and I really like it. So,
Totally.
how did you come up with this, or decide on this type?
Yeah. I know you and I talked briefly before the show, but that's not an original design to me. I'm going to say that right away. There's some guys that have been making that style sheath for a while. I'm not sure where it originated. I'm going to do a little homework now that we talked and see if I can find that out. But um, I've always kind of approached things like, when I can make, if I see something I like, whether it's a knife or, I mean, I have this carpentry background. I'm like, I can probably make that better and cheaper. Like, that's just, it's not like a prideful thing, and it's not casting any doubt on whatever product that is. But um, that was my approach coming into knife making. And then when I saw those sheaths, I'm like, those are really cool. But like, I think if I can make those really well. I just know I can. And so I just, did a little digging. I got in touch with some other guys on some Facebook groups, because, the hardest thing was to figure out those little rivets,
Yeah.
those were so hard for me to find, and finding the right tool. And finally I figured out where they came from. I got the tools and the dies in order to set them. And so I make my own molds for the sheaths out of MDF. A lot of guys will have them cut. Do you want to see one? I have them.
Yeah, sure. What's
Yeah, yeah.
MDF?
Okay, I'll show you. So MDF is typically used in, carpentry and building construction. It's like compressed shredded paper or cardboard. That's like a really like generic description of it.
Okay.
But it's a lightweight, it's easy to use, it's easy to cut and shape. And so what I did was I just made molds for myself. These are old molds. I have new molds now that don't have as many holes to, vacuum seal these, but I just figured out, oh, it's really just a front panel and a back panel. And so I came up with these molds that I use with my my little vacuum presses over here. I've got a couple different versions. And this allows me to heat Kydex, mold it onto this, put a flat back panel on it, draw out the shape, and then do all the drilling and cutting and whatnot. And so that's the basic genesis of it. And I made one, and it was pretty good. And I had seen somebody else put Velcro on the inside. I'm like, that is so smart. And so I just started doing that. But I did take a lot of time to kind of get the dimensions right so that you could eliminate any rattle. You know what I mean? Because that's always disappointing when you get a really nice knife and like there's rattle, and it's almost like the sheath is always an afterthought. And for me, that was always in like the front of my mind. Like I have to accomplish like a solid sheath, because without that, it kind of gets lost.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And also, and during our conversation before we were rolling, we were talking that we're not exactly sure where these originated, but we both kind of came to know these through Offensive Industries.
Yeah.
I've seen his stuff, very cool. I'm interested in his knives and his sheaths, but like I said, this is my first exposure to this, and to see your, I mean, in real life, and to see your mold is very cool. So that's kind of like a particle board, sort of.
Yeah.
Kind of, and it's like you sculpted it or cut it out with a bandsaw and layered it. And you were talking about the front is obviously that sort of stepped,
Yes.
to accommodate the DCC clip. Nice choice on the clip, by the way.
Matt, the owner, used to be like my neighbor.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he lived like down the street from me, and I didn't know that, and I always loved his clips. The clips, I thought they were amazing. I was buying them, and I remember one day, like my package got lost, and then I noticed on my front steps, I'm like, how did that happen? Like, what? He's like, oh, he texted me. He's like, I just dropped it off. I'm like, you dropped it off? He's like, yeah, I live up the street, bro. And I'm like, what? So
That's awesome.
he's been like an awesome mentor for me. He's moved out of state now and whatnot, but his clips, in my opinion, we pretty much exclusively use those because I just trust them and I want our gear not to fail. So
I love them. I know a lot of knife makers who use them exclusively. I'm always talking about them. I love their little logo.
Yeah.
They're the best. I mean,
Yeah.
in my opinion. You were talking about the flat back panel. It is not quite flat. How do you get that sort of kind of bulge? Do you have to put a knife in there every time, or do you have a backside mold for it?
No, so they start out flat, and I think I have one right here. Oops, sorry about that. I kicked the sheet. All right. Here we go. Yeah, so they start out flat. This one is black with like a koi fish blue back.
Oh, nice.
And so what you need to do is take a knife. I have one right here. And you have to heat up gently the back of the Kydex right here. Because you can force this thing in there, but with the dimensions that I made them in the width, it's not going to fit right. Because you could make this opening wider to fit it so it drops in without needing to modify the back. But I found that if you heat up the back of it and you put the knife in and gently mold it around it, that's what really grabs the knife and gives it some awesome retention.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I like it. I like the way, because I feel like it feels better in pocket.
Yeah.
Now, I carry mine in pocket. At first, I attempted in the waistband. I think that this would work great in the waistband if I hadn't indulged so much around the holidays. I'd have extra room, but I don't have that room right now. I'm working on it, but you also offer these dedicated in the waistband sheaths that offer a little bit more handle grab. Is that right?
Yes. Yep, I have one. Those are considered a standard sheath for us. This is just a training blade. So I have, obviously, this is a mini VSK training blade. This is the standard sheath, and this is the deep carry sheath. So, if I had my way, I would probably only make these because they're a lot easier and they're just so much more practical in my mind. But a lot of people do like being able to get a full grip on a knife, and so we do offer that option for now.
Yeah, those look great too. I'm a big fan of that style of carry, especially on a knife this large. And
Yeah.
um, as I was mentioning before, oddly enough, this to me is way more comfortable in the front pocket. And it even, I was concerned that I would only be able to carry this in jeans because jeans have that sort of
Hmm.
horizontal pocket
Hmm.
seam. But even in khaki pants with that steep vertical, this works really well and doesn't stick out of the pocket, perpendicular to the leg. It's a really great balance um, you've got here.
That's awesome. No, thank you. The height of the knife coming out of the sheath, I played around with because you want to be able to index it when it's in your pocket or wherever it is, either forward or reverse grip, whatever you're going for. And so if it was too short, it wouldn't work. If it was too long, it'd be obnoxious. And so I found this distance that we came up with should be really, really just works great either in the pocket or in the waistband. I have used some other knives where the knives stick out kind of at a weird angle or too far, and I'd catch them and deploy them on like a seatbelt or like a jacket all the time. And I haven't done this with these at all yet, so I think it's a good balance.
Yeah. Ooh, that's yeah. You don't want your knife to accidentally come
No,
out of the sheath or out of your pocket.
no.
Um, so before we move away from the VSK, the VSK one, you also offer the handle. This is sort of a standard G10 handle. You
Yep,
also offer it in a sort of sculpted rock pattern. Oh yeah, let's see that.
yep, we've got it right here.
Yeah, my buddy Dave has one of these. He's a
Yeah, he
fellow
does.
Connecticut.
I keep joking with my friends and like saying, "Desert tan's the new black." Like, prove me wrong.
Yeah,
But yeah, this is G10, the 1/4 inch thick scales that I shape. Everything's done by hand. So these start out as these are black, but square pieces of G10, and we've got to trim them and form them to each individual blade, and then on a small wheel attachment on the grinder, go ahead and grind in this rock pattern. And a lot of people do it random, but it's not random for me. What I do is I hold the knife in my hand, and then I take a marker and I mark where each individual finger lies when I grip this knife. So that way, when I'm grinding in these peaks and valleys, you can kind of see there's a pattern to it. That way your fingers fall and they actually grip the knife. It's not a random pattern. And so there's no hot spots. And also in the reverse grip, same thing. You can see that the fingers fall into these grooves really nice. Even in the thumb, the punyo up here, your thumb catches that. So there is a lot of intent behind that design.
So I want to take a minute to talk about your process. You do pretty much everything in your shop, right?
Yeah, the only thing that we have automated, quote, would be the water jet blanks, because it's just not feasible or cost effective to cut them all out on a
Right.
bandsaw.
Yeah, you'd be many knives behind at this
And I'd
point.
have more neck injuries and problems and issues going on, and I'm trying to avoid those for the rest of the time I have here.
So take us through the life or the birth of a knife.
Yeah, that's a great question. So it pretty much starts out with a blank. I have a bunch here. Excuse my exit from the screen. I'll use the VSK as an example. This is the blank that comes. We use New Jersey Steel Baron. I'm sure you're familiar with New Jersey Steel Baron out of New Jersey. They're phenomenal. I've used them forever, and I think they're just the best. I love working with those guys. But anyway, we get these cut and sent in, and what most people don't understand is, I know some people might consider doing this cheating. Okay, I don't think it's cheating at all, right? Okay. Water jetting technology is amazing, and what one of the downsides is that, like, this isn't ready to go. There's still a lot of prep work to do on a knife blank once you do it, because what happens is the water jet, there's something called a kerf. That's the cut that a tool will make, whether it's a saw or whether it's water jet. And the kerf on a water jet is not straight. It's actually has some taper to it. And so these the profile is not square. It's actually, you can see it probably right here.
Oh yeah.
You can see that slight angle. And so there's some companies that don't grind that away, and they kind of leave it, and you can kind of see there's some, like, it's kind of a rough, it's not that pretty. Some companies leave that, but that wasn't acceptable for us. And so I decided that on all our knives, we're going to grind that square. And so you have to take this knife blank, come over to the grinder and grind the entire profile square. That takes a little time. And then what we do on the VSK is we add hand filed jimping to this thumb ramp right here. So you can see there's no jimping on this guy. All right. But then if I take this guy that's been heat treated, you can see, hopefully you can see it. You can see some jimping there, right?
Sure.
Okay, so that's hand filed in. And so that's one of the processes. And then the last thing we do before it's heat treated, we do all this, we grind our bevels post heat treat, but pre-heat treat, you got to profile it, do the jimping, and then we have to bore out the hardware holes to make sure they're the right dimensions. And so you take that blank, heat treat it, and then it comes out, and I set all my lines, my grind lines on the blade, so I know where to grind to, so you get some even grind lines. And aesthetics are super important to me. And so if you can have a bunch of random lines, but if they don't make sense, it's confusing. And so like you noticed in the beginning, I designed this so that the tip lined up center line in the knife. When you put the scales on, I matched the pitch or angle of the bevel to the pitch of the scale. So you can see, you look at the knife, these two are equal. It's a little hard maybe to tell in this picture, but they're equal. And I try to end it right where that point is in the scale. And so everything kind of ends up being super aesthetically pleasing, even though they're simple things, the simple things add up and they kind of have this compound effect. So so then once that's done, heat treats, we do all our own heat treating. We have an even heat kiln. We use all the recipes from New Jersey Steel Baron. They're wrapped in foil. We get foil packs pre-cut from Centrico. Their vac packs are amazing. They're a couple bucks. And so we do our own heat treat, following the recipe, temper them here. And once that's done, then it's moving on to scales and to sheath work.
Wow. So you grind the bevels post heat treat.
Yes. Yep.
Now, what is the benefit of that in your opinion? To me, it seems like it'd be easier as a non-knife maker to do it before it's heat treated.
Yeah, no, it is easier. It's you're not grinding hardened steel. So there's less heat buildup. There's less wear and tear on your belts. But the problem is, and other guys do it fantastic, is that I don't want these things to warp when I heat treat them.
Okay. Yeah.
And because I'm grinding everything by hand, excuse me, there's gonna be some variations on either side of the bevel, as opposed to a knife that's machined. So the face side bevel could be slightly further forward maybe than the opposite side. And sometimes when you're heat treating stuff, the knife will pull one way or the other depending on how much material is removed, especially how thin you grind. There's a lot of things that come into play there, but for me, I decided that I don't want to risk and have to deal with warped blades, and so I'm going to grind post heat treat. It takes a little longer. I have to dunk them in the little bucket of water over there every time I do a couple passes to keep the heat down, but that's what I decided to do.
I think it's pretty impressive because it almost looks like I don't want to say machine made. It doesn't look like a CNC knife or anything like that,
Right.
but it's so even. It's pretty. I mean, it's very, very well done. And when you look at it from all the angles and see where the grind meets the spine and everything is even. And I don't know. It's impressive.
Yeah.
That's all I'm trying to say, that these are handmade. I kind of assumed when I first got this, when you first sent this to me, thank you very much, I got to say, that it, I'm like, I was looking at it and I see the grind lines. I'm like, huh. And so it's very impressive to me that these are all handmade and that you're getting them out. I could see your heat treat oven in the back. It's not huge. You're not heat treating 100 knives at a time.
8 at a time.
8 at a time.
Yeah. And we I do, so they're not freehand ground. I have the jig, which listen, I like showing this stuff because I learned from watching other makers. And so hopefully I'm sure your other viewers will appreciate a lot of this stuff. Maybe they'll learn something, maybe they won't. But there's a couple different jigs I have. One was this one jig, I think Origin Blade Maker makes it. This is a phenomenal jig. It works really well. But what I found was there's a company called Moen Precision Tooling, I believe, and they make this guy. This thing is incredible. And so it's a blade grinding jig, but it's got a lot more surface area. It's completely stable. There's no play in it. You've got little tabs where you can adjust that when the blade goes into this clamp here, they can rest on these little arms, and it's fully adjustable. And so this top part comes down. It has file guides. I use an additional file guide in front of that, but the knife gets clamped in here, and then you can reverse it either way. And so it's very efficient, and it's almost like having a CNC in a sense. If you buy this tool and you have a good grinder with a carbide platen, you can get phenomenal grinds.
You know, that's the kind of thing you have to do, it seems, or from what I've gathered in talking to a bunch of knife makers. This is the kind of thing you have to do when you're making knives by hand, and you want to replicate them and make them, you know,
Repeatable
all
and
pretty much the same. Yeah,
Yeah.
repeatable.
Right.
But also be able to make enough to make a living at it. You know?
Exactly. And have them be cost effective and have good margins, all that stuff.
Yeah. There's something else that you've been doing that has really caught on like wildfire, and I want to talk about this. This is your Universal Paring Knife Sheath, and I
Yes.
showed this off on Thursday Night Knives the other night.
Cool.
And we're going to talk. I'm going to be doing close-up videos of all this
Sure.
stuff.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah.
Oh yeah, but this is such a great idea, and tell us about it.
Yeah, so it's a universal paring knife sheath, and it's funny. A lot of things I do, I kind of just like I'll get an idea in my brain, and then I have to get it out. Like I'll be grinding knives or doing something, and I'll be like, idea for a quick video or a new design, and I'll jump out. So I just stopped grinding one day, and I was like, I had this idea. It's hard to explain. If anyone who is artistic and creative, it's almost like you get these downloads. It's really weird. And I have my faith kind of reasons for that, maybe, but the inspiration is coming from somewhere, and I got it. I'm like, I should make like a universal paring knife sheath. I've heard so much about how Ed Calderon famously made them famous, right? One of the most commonly carried fixed blade knives in the world because they're cheap and readily accessible, right? To the criminal and the non-criminal, I believe, right? Everybody's carrying them.
Yeah.
And so, I have traveled a bit around the country, a lot around the country, actually. And then I've traveled once overseas to Uganda, Africa in 2017. And I know what it's like to feel. I don't like feeling vulnerable. And I don't use that term lightly, like, oh, I feel vulnerable. No, I have the right to protect myself. Everyone does. I believe everyone's born with that right. Unfortunately, depending on where you live, that right is either mildly restricted, not restricted, or severely restricted. And if I have the ability to protect myself, then I'm going to take advantage of that. It's kind of like, wearing your seatbelt, right? Like you drive in a car, you wear a seatbelt. Why? In case you get in an accident. You have insurance, fire insurance on your house in case there's a fire. And I worked a career where, I wasn't on the offensive side tactically, with criminals and stuff, but I was on the offensive and defensive side with fires and all sorts of things. I saw a lot of bad things happen to really good people that were just not prepared or didn't expect it. And so I know and understand that the potential for a terrible car accident, house fire, or some sort of violent encounter with someone attacking me or a loved one, the potential exists for it to happen as long as I'm living here. It doesn't matter where I'm living, that potential is there. And so just like wearing my seatbelt or having insurance, I'm going to carry a tool. And so traveling is difficult because, airlines are not that reliable. My experience has been they lose my luggage, things get stolen out of my luggage. I love my knives, I love my tools, and I just don't trust them with those things, especially when I went to Africa. Man, they lost all of my luggage, and I was in the middle of Africa for 10 days wearing the same socks, shoes, and underwear, doing the front, the back, the inside, the outside. I mean, it was crazy, right? And so I'm like, okay, I just there's an acceptable level of risk, and if I can control as many factors in my personal safety, my family's, I'm gonna do that. And so, long-winded answer to this universal paring knife, because I thought like, oh well, you can bring a piece of plastic and a little metal clip on a plane, like they're going to restrict that. Some countries are actually doing that, like the UK, I believe, for example. They're very, very picky, but for the most part, you can travel with that thing in your carry-on bag. I had a buddy who just traveled to Florida recently, and he clipped it right on his backpack and went right through and had no problems. He actually stuck his toothbrush in it, which was hilarious. But it solves a lot of problems, and another thing is, there's so many different paring knives. It's kind of hard to like make one sheath. There's guys that have made really awesome travel sheaths. I think I found recently in the past for certain models, but if you don't find that one, you're kind of out of luck. So that was kind of the genesis of that idea for the sheath.
So just to clarify for the uninitiated, maybe the idea is you can't travel with a weapon,
No.
but you
Yes,
can
thank you.
travel with a sheath, and you
Right.
can wherever you go.
Right.
Say you travel to New York City, you can show up into New York City. Not that I'm recommending you do, but show up to New York City with the sheath and go to your food emporium and buy a cheap you know
Paring knife.
$5 paring knife,
Yep.
and while you're there, you can carry this around. Then when you
Right.
leave, you can give it to a homeless guy or whatever, and but take the sheath with you. You know what
Yes,
I'm
that's
saying?
right. Absolutely.
Everyone needs a knife, including the homeless. So
That's
you
right.
can
That's
do
right.
you can do whatever you're going to do with that knife, but it's the knife itself is not going to be missed. But
Right.
the fact that you have a a sheath to carry it in. Now, this is the paring knife you sent me. It's
Mhm.
a great, useful knife. But if I lost it, it would only break my heart because you gave it to me, Michael. But I got another paring knife from work, an inexpensive paring knife, fits right in there.
Yep.
Um, I have a Shun paring knife upstairs that fit in there
Oh,
perfectly,
great.
and it's got a rounded handle, kind of
Yep.
a D-shaped handle.
Yep.
The only one that doesn't fit in here is a custom that's got a wide, much. It's a bigger knife,
Yeah.
but basically any knife that you can pick up at the grocery store is going to fit in here, and you can walk around with it. And I think it's a brilliant idea. How have these been selling?
Man, it's like taking over our business. Like we've gotten hundreds of orders in the past couple weeks. So we went from a certain sales point last year. We did pretty well. We've already doubled our sales, as a company starting from like the first of this year. And so we're
Wow.
just like, holy crap, overwhelmed. And so they've really taken over a lot of things. And so we have tons of knife orders. Oh my gosh, we have so many knife orders, but we have so many paring knife sheath orders at the same time. And so it's really fun. It's really exciting. It's challenging, but they've in I don't like using the word viral because like what's the measure of viral for us? They've gone viral, and we're just really really excited because we've gotten so much good feedback too from people like just saying how awesome they are and like wow like why didn't I think of that? You know what I mean? And I don't know why I thought of it, but I did, and we're happy that we did.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned Ed Calderon before because I had the honor and pleasure of having him on this show a few years
Yeah.
back,
Yeah.
and that was one of the things we talked about. His Elvia, his paring knife concept, which came from his mother, who carried around a little curved fruit knife. Oh yeah, yeah, that's his
So,
knife up
so listen,
top.
I just bought this knife the other day to make sure, but this is one of our paring knife sheaths, and his how do you say it?
But,
El Pinero or something. Tops makes it
yeah,
right. Yeah. Anyway, fits perfectly inside this sheath just as it is. So if you carry one of these and you're looking for a good sheath for it, it phenomenally well works really well with that.
El Pianero. Yeah,
El
that's right.
Pinero. Thank you.
Right,
Yes.
right.
Yes.
Um, Yeah, so I mean, and he's got all sorts of ideas about how to carry knives in different ways, and I've seen him with a lighter shrink a drinking, like a water bottle around a knife and turn it. So if worse comes to worse, you can do that in the field, but why not just show up and have this with you? I think this is a great idea. I want to in these last minutes we have here, I want to talk about the business aspect of it
Mhm.
because um, first of all, I know that your wife plays a large role in your business. I love that. But so you have a whole bunch of knife orders, and now you have a ton of these orders. How, how do you keep up, or how do you intend to keep up if this, uh, s- you know, compounds?
Yeah. No, that's a phenomenal question, and I don't have the whole answer right now because this has all happened so quickly. And so, and unfortunately, because it happened so quickly, I look at my brain and a brain as like a Wi-Fi like router, and the more things that are taking up bandwidth, right, the harder it is to kind of manage. And so I try to declutter my life in a way that I have bandwidth that can navigate and manage problems like this. And I love problem solving. And so, what that means is that, especially with the sheets, we're going to have to move towards automation, but not like third party outsourcing stuff. All
Mhm.
right. I'm actively learning and on a journey to learn CAD and some software. I have I know someone who has an engineering business in town that can give me some files and make some molds. But basically, we're going to be moving towards some sort of like CNC routers in the shop that we can have cut the sheaths. You know what I mean? Because again, I got some videos on our YouTube channel that show like the process it takes to make it all by hand using, I don't want to say primitive tools, but in light of automated equipment. And so that's what we're moving towards. But with the blades themselves, I mean, those we're going to continue to do by hand as long as possible. We can probably start cutting the scales out on that router when we get there.
Right.
That's going to help a lot. But we really feel convicted to like really keep this a home-based USA. We're never going to outsource ever. We're not going to go to another country. That's fine if you do, but we want to have a USA made product with as many USA made materials as possible, made by hand, made by people that you can relate to. And so we're still figuring it out, but we're getting there, and it's super exciting.
Yeah, I think people really relate to that, and I could be mistaken, or maybe I'm just speaking for myself, but I like the idea of having knives that are made, these are custom handmade knives, because, and I say custom also because when you go to your website, there are a bunch of different options you can choose for each knife, and not just the sheath, but also how the handle is treated and a number of other details that you can have just specced out to yourself. But I think people like knowing and having some connection to the person or the outfit that's making it. Even you were holding up Tops, that Tops El Pionero. Even a company as big as that is still small, and we kind of know them through their presence on YouTube and stuff. But we know that stuff is made in-house, and it's just nice knowing that stuff is made in-house. No one's going to care whether this was cut out with a CNC machine or not, but they are going to care that it was made by you and your company in your small outfit in Southern Connecticut.
Yeah, I think it's really important. Well, let me back up. I can't explain it. I think people that are knife people understand knives know. There's something about a knife that is ancient and it's primitive. It goes so far back in history. I almost look at it as like a spiritual thing. And so I believe when you're making something by hand, you're taking something from you and you're imparting it into that, whatever it is you're creating, whatever form of art. And for my art form is knives. And so there's a different feel that I feel I can sense between 100% machined, factory made blade, which are great, but versus a handmade tool. I don't know. It's almost like I can sense something. So I kind of look at it like my hands are touching this. I'm imparting something into this that I'm passing on to you. And I think that means something.
Yeah, I think that's commonly referred to as soul.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, it's true. I believe it.
Soul.
I believe it.
So in the length of time that you have been Armis Knife, well, first of all, actually, I got to ask, what is Armis?
Oh, okay. Fantastic question. I'm glad you asked. So Armis is actually Latin for armor. And the original name of the company, when I started first making knives, back in 2019, was Bad Son Blades, SON. It was kind of this identity thing that I had, and I was going through some stuff, and I thought maybe if I embraced it, that would set me free. No, that's not true. That wasn't the case. And so walking through the retirement process that I went through, I was very sick at the time too, because I ended up getting COVID really bad in 2021. Didn't sleep, like no sleep for almost a year. Like it was horrible. Like, that's a whole nother podcast. But the things that me and my family experienced, especially on a spiritual level, like we just felt like we got nuked in every single way, physically, mentally, spiritually, things, you experience when you don't sleep. Like there's a lot of crazy stuff that happens. And so coming out of that, I have a very strong faith in God, and the scriptures talk a lot about there's this unseen enemy. Like we're not battling with flesh and blood. There's a spiritual realm that we don't understand. Like we don't understand it at all, but it's constantly happening. And it talks about putting on the armor of God, and kind of like there's different descriptions of that. But for me, that was like, okay, there's a spiritual thing that's happening. I don't know what it is, but Armis is Latin for armor. And, you can think of a knife or a sword as part of your armor. And so kind of like For me, if you get people, I don't have any tattoos, but if you get a tattoo, that's because it means something to you. It's there to remind you of something. And so for me, every time I put a knife in my pocket, one of our knives specifically, or a carry knife, I'm reminded that, hey, there's this unseen realm, there's this battle going on. And there was something that was trying to take me out. And so I know and believe that my purpose now is to have this company, and where it's going to go and what it's going to do, I don't know. But I know that it's almost like something was trying to stop me from that. And so this is armor that we've put on in order to move forward as a company. And I hope that people can relate to that message in their own lives.
Oh my God, that is so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I concur on every point you made there. Like, there is an unseen battle, in my opinion, and I think that there are spiritual forces all around us always,
Right.
that we just can't see, and we don't. Maybe we have that part turned off in us that we can't perceive it, or maybe that's a self-defense thing. But yeah, I believe that 100%. That's a great explanation of what Armis stands for. What kind of advice would you give to knife makers or people who want to get into people who want to do what you're doing?
Yeah. No, that's another great question. And I think we limit ourselves a lot. I think for some reason that's in our part of our, not DNA, but like the social structure and stuff. It's like, but I want to tell people that you can do anything that you put your heart and your mind to. If you have a passion, pursue that passion, even if it doesn't turn into, another career like it did for me. I believe we were made in the image of a creator. And that means that we are creators and we're supposed to create, right? We get these things that come from somewhere, right? And like these ideas that I've had. And the more and more that I've pursued the creative side of things, man, it's healed me in so many ways and just brought me to another level personally. And so I encourage everybody, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, create something, do something. You unlock your brain when you do that. You're connected to something when you do that. And there's a lot of joy in that. And so specifically knife making, I mean, the barrier to entry has never been lower, I don't think, especially with social media and YouTube. I mean, you can get a college education by watching YouTube videos, because you're learning from people that have hands-on experience, not just textual or knowledge-based experience. They've done these things, they've made mistakes. You can learn from their mistakes. So I would encourage anyone who wants to do it, do it. You can make a knife with the very basic tools. It's all on YouTube. You can reach out to me through my website or for any of our social media, and I will gladly give you, I don't hold any secrets, a lot of people I'm sure have their methods that they don't want to disclose, but I'm an open book. I have nothing to hide. And I think that's kind of like the best way to approach things for me. And so don't be afraid, pursue it, and it'll change your lives in ways that are immeasurable.
Wow. I'm going to leave it right there. That's absolutely. And I think you're leaving an invitation out to people to reach out to you if they're interested is great. I've heard so much about how open people are, especially custom knife makers. You don't get that from the giant companies, but how open people are to sharing their craft, because they know what I make is going to be different from what you make, even if we're sharing a similar process.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, Michael, thank you so much. Michael Grasso of Armis Knife and Tool. Thank you so much for joining me on the Knife Junkie podcast. It's been awesome, sir.
Yeah, Bob, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Take care.
Bye.
There he goes, ladies and gentlemen. Michael Grasso of Armis Knife and Tool. I love that explanation of the name. It's inspirational. Go check him out. I know he's on Facebook and on YouTube, and I think he's got an account on Instagram. He hasn't started filling that out yet, but once he does, you'll be able to see him there too. But reach out to Michael and go to the website. That's where I've been going to check out his work. You will love what you see there. So check that out. And also, if you need to travel, there's only one way to travel, and that's with a sheath, not a knife. You get the knife when you show up. All right, for Jim working his magic behind the switcher, I'm Bob DeMarco saying, until next time, don't take dull for an answer.
Thanks for listening to the Knife Junkie podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please rate and review at reviewthepodcast.com. For show notes for today's episode, additional resources, and to listen to past episodes, visit our website, TheKnifeJunkie.com. You can also watch our latest videos on YouTube at TheKnifeJunkie.com/YouTube. Check out some great knife photos on TheKnifeJunkie.com/Instagram, and join our Facebook group at TheKnifeJunkie.com/Facebook. And if you have a question or comment, email them to bob@TheKnifeJunkie.com or call our 24/7 listener line at 724-466-4487, and you may hear your comment or question answered on an upcoming episode of the Knife Junkie podcast.